This is the HPT.
Sit right down, put on your poker face. You with the big dogs now. Better bring your best game. Talk trash all you want. To me, it's all the same. You won't leave with much when you come in second place. And I'm the one with the stack showing 7 to the jack. Gonna cry to your mama, cause I'm sending you back. I'll be the last man standing with the money in my hand. I'll be the last man standing with the money in my hand. Last man standing with the money in my hand. I'll be the last man standing with the money in my hand.
Hello and welcome again to the HPT. This week we crown a champion from the Majestic Star Casinos just outside of Chicago here in Gary, Indiana. I'm Fred Bevel. The brains and beauty of this operation is Maria Ho. And Maria, whenever we come to the Chicagoland area, it's never a dull moment.
The players here in Chicago and from across the nation have built a huge prize pool worth over $648,000. Now the final few remaining at this final table can almost taste that championship and over $150,000 that comes with it.
Maria, you've been in this situation before, a championship title and 6-figure prize on the line. Do you put all of that out of your mind while you're playing?
Absolutely. You really can't be focused on the stakes. You have to make the best decision possible on every street, and thinking about the money that you're playing for at the top is just going to get in the way of that.
That's my problem with poker. I'm too busy thinking about what I could win. Let's not keep these guys waiting any longer. Let's check the updated chip counts and the money on the line and get right to this final table.
The 6 players remaining are all eyeing that first place prize of over $152,000. Big 6-figure payday for the winner. But our 6th place finisher is going to go home with at least $24,000, which is not a drop in the bucket either.
Not at all. A big payday waiting for everybody at this final table that's left. And here's the updated chip count.
Nick Schwarman has a good chance of ending up with one of the bigger payouts here. He is our chip leader with over $4.5 million. Aaron Massey is in the second spot with just under $3 million. Joseph Hebda and Nemi Allegado have a little bit of work to do. They are under 20 big blinds.
Blinds continuing at this final table at $25,000 and $50,000 with a $5,000 chip ante. 4 eliminations away from our next HPT champion. Action in this hand will begin with Ed O'Shaughnessy. He's going to fold, as does Nick Schwarman. And this is Nemi Allegado. He's had a bigger stack, he's had a small stack, and right now Marie is on the smaller side of that stack.
He raises to $100,000 with King 10 off, and Joseph behind him is going to move in 17 big blinds with Ace Queen. This is the very standard play in this situation. And Nemi is going to call it off, which I really don't like that at all. I think that is not a good spot for Nemi whatsoever. They have similar chip stacks basically for both of their tournament lives, and I just think it's extremely loose.
Over $1.75 million in this pot. King 10 is alive, but Ace Queen is ahead. Here comes the flop.
The flop is Deuce 7 Queen Rainbow, so Joseph pulls ahead even more, pairing his queen.
So 1 live card in the king left for Nemi, or running straight cards.
Turn is the Jack of Hearts, and that actually gives Nemi an open-ended straight draw, but Joseph does have an ace blocker.
Big sweat going into the river. Nemi hoping to find the 9 or the ace to straighten out. Otherwise, he will be our 6th place finisher. The river is the 4 of diamonds. Couldn't be more of a brick, and that will do it for Nemi Allegado at this final table. We are now 5-handed on the road to our newest HPT champion from East Chicago when we come back to the HPT.
How you doing, everybody? It's James Larson reporting for the HPT here in Gary, Indiana at the Majestic Star Casino. 5 players remain here at our nationally televised final table. Let's send it back into the poker room to Freddie and Maria.
Nick Schwarman has firmly planted himself in the chip leader position. Everybody else, though, has chips to play with. Our shortest stack, Joseph Hebda, has 36 big blinds. Everybody else kind of in the middle trying to catch Nick.
Blinds are continuing at $25,000 and $50,000 with a $5,000 chip ante. As chip leader Nick Schwarman folds. Now we're on the 9 seat of Joseph Hedba.
And Joseph wakes up with kings here. He's going to make it $100,000 to go. Oh, wow. And Aaron Massey wakes up with aces behind him. And, you know, it looked from when Joseph was pretty much all in there, Aaron was sweating him. So it's I mean, they're friends. It's kind of tough to play against your friends, especially when it's a cooler. This is just a cooler.
And as expected, Aaron is going to 3-bet here, makes it 415,000.
I think Aaron could have definitely flatted his hand and also slow played. There's just no way that he would put Joseph on a hand this big, and I think both of them are just going to end up fast playing it here. I mean, I don't know if this is why, but you don't really want to trap your friends. It's a difficult situation, but, you know, Joseph just goes all in and Aaron snap calls, and, you know, it's hard to root against your friend here, but this is just an unfortunate setup of the deck.
Huge pot, over 3.6 million as we go to the flop.
The flop is 3, Jack 4, 2 spades. Joseph does have the king of spades in his hand, and he's going to need to go runner or hit a king.
Looking pretty thin for Joe right now, unless we get a good sweat here on the turn with a spade card.
The turn is the 4 of clubs. That's a safe card. Now the runner outs are gone for Joseph. He's going to need a king and only a king on the river. Otherwise, he'll be knocked out by his friend Aaron Massey in 5th place.
Aaron Massey poised to just get huge with his chip stack as the river is the queen of hearts. And that will do it for Joseph Headbutt. Nothing he can really do there, Maria. Kings versus aces.
No, not at all. And never feels good to knock out a friend at a final table, but Joseph's going to go home with over 31,000. He can't be too sad about that.
And now it is Aaron Massey and Nick Schwarman in the chip lead as blinds move up to 30 and 60,000 with a 10,000 chip ante. Ed Oshana will be under the gun here as we are now 4-handed at this final table. Pocket sevens for Ed. And Maria, as we get shorter and shorter, we all know the ranges open up wider, but how should the aggression change as we get shorter?
I feel like when you do play short-handed and you know that your opponents are widening their opening ranges, I would like to see a few more 3-bets, squeezes, you know, that kind of thing. Because I think it's a little bit easier to start showing more aggression when you feel like your opponents have weaker holdings.
1, 2, 5. Nick is going to make the call with ace-10, and Amari Love is going to follow suit with pocket threes. So 3 out of the 4 players left are going to see a flop here.
And the flop is deuce 10-6, couple of spades. So Nick has outflopped them both, pulling into the lead with a pair of tens, ace kicker.
Amari is going to check, and Ed's going to test out those pocket sevens by firing 170,000 here on the flop.
170 is the bet. 170,000 chip bet by 8.
I think this is a fine continuation bet by Edward. I think there's not a whole lot to be afraid of on this flop.
And Nick looks like he is staging raising chips there, and he is going to make it 375,000 now.
I think there's a chance that he might get looked up by Edward on the flop because there is a flush draw possible, and Edward might think that Nick is just raising on the come here.
Amari quickly folded after Nick raised, and now Ed is going to smartly fold. He's going to save some chips as once again Nick Schwarman scoops another pot, this one worth 990,000. Nick is one of those guys that'll probably be carded until he's 50. He just has that kind of baby face to him. Action in this hand is going to start with Aaron. He folds over to Doc Love. Amari Doc Love. That is the coolest name ever. Should be like a jazz musician
For
or something.
sure. He should be a musician of some sort.
Doc is going to raise it up here with a suited ace-8. Makes it 130,000.
Ed looks down at king-queen in the small blind. And I think this is the kind of hand where sometimes players think, should I 3-bet? Should I call? In this case, I think it's fine to just call here. It's definitely a good hand 4-handed. You have to play it out of position, though, which sometimes can be tricky.
The flop is queen, ace, 7, rainbow. So both players catch a piece of this. Amari hits top pair. Ed hits second pair.
And this is just a situation where Edward's definitely going to check call 1 at least here. It's hard to give someone an ace automatically because they raise from the button, so you really have to look them up.
Amari fires 160,000. And you can see, if you're watching, Ed immediately looks at Amari's stack as Amari is putting out that bet. That's a huge tell that he is not going anywhere. And he is going to make the call.
And I think there's a lot of turns that's just going to trap Eddie into this hand here. I think there's definitely not a lot of scary turns for King Queen.
4 of spades falls on the turn here. Ed's going to check, and Amari's going to check back.
I'm kind of surprised at Amari checking back. I guess he is pot controlling, but there's no real reason he shouldn't think he has the best hand. I think if Edward had a bigger ace, he would have heard about it pre-flop.
Deuce of spades on the river, total brick. So Amari has the best hand, and Ed's not going to challenge him. He's going to check over to him.
And now I think Amari can very safely value bet top pair here, and Edward will probably have to call him since Amari did check the turn. And sometimes you never know. Maybe people check the turn to try to get value on the river, so you never really know exactly what a player is thinking.
200,000 is the bet from Amari.
A lot of poker is two-street poker, whether it's flop and turn river, turn and river. So sometimes when you don't know if you could get 3 streets of value, it's okay to check back the turn, but feeling like you still have the best hand.
Wow, another teaching moment from my friend and pro poker player, Maria Ho. If you don't have a pen and paper out while you're watching the HPT these days, you are missing big opportunities to get free poker lessons. He is going to make the call. Amari announces the ace, and probably not a huge shock to Ed, but he is going to have to lay down second pair here, as over $1 million in chips is going to go Doc's way.
With a few players eliminated, now those pay jumps are starting to get more and more significant. Come back for all of that action.
Thanks for coming back to the HPT, where over $150,000 is on the line for the last player standing. Let's get right back to this final table.
Nick Schwarman is still the chip leader, nearing almost $5 million. Aaron has closed that gap a lot after he eliminated Joe with his aces versus Joe's kings. Amari Love has $2.7 million, and Edward is on the shorter side with $1.2 million.
Edward's sitting at 21 big blinds, so he's got pretty much the perfect 3-bet shoving stack here, as everybody else very healthy. Amari's second lowest, still with 45 big blinds, so a long way to go before we crown our newest HPT champion. Blinds continuing at 30 and 60,000 with a 10,000 chip ante.
And you know, I never mind having a 3-bet shoving stack, especially when we're shorthanded. I think there's a lot more opportunities for you to 3-bet shove a little bit on the lighter side and pick up a good size pot.
It's level 2 of the whole event where you really don't want that 3-bet shove stack, right? Action in this hand will be on Ed. 125,000 is the bet with ace king. And now we are on Nick Schwarman. And Nick is going to 3-bet here with ace queen, Maria.
And that's definitely very standard four-handed. You can't really put Edward on ace king here just because he opened the pot. And Edward has such a huge hand and not a whole lot of chips, so I would definitely 4-bet shove if I were him, and he does do indeed that. Nick obviously has to call.
Nick committed to the hand after that 3-bet, so over $2.5 million in chips in this pot. Nick going to the flop for the first time today, behind.
You know, Edward's found himself in a really good spot to double up here. These are just 2 big hands, four-handed, that are unavoidably going to collide.
The flop is 7-6-3 rainbow, so brick, brick, brick for both of these players. Ed, a huge lead right now.
And the turn pair is a 7, and that gives Nick a few outs to chop now. A 6 or a 3 will chop this pot.
A queen will win it for Nick. Ed hoping to fade all of that and double up as we go to the river. The river is the jack of diamonds, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Ed's going to get a full double up here with ace king high.
That's going to put Ed back in a pretty good spot, and Nick will still be comfortable with his stack after this hand, but obviously when it's four-handed, every pot matters and every elimination matters.
A little over $2.5 million going Ed's way, and Ed will be under the gun in this hand. And he is going to take this hand off, so we'll move over to Nick Schwarman now.
125.
And Nick is going to raise from the button with king 3 suited. Nick here playing position more than cards. As Aaron Massey looks down at Queen Jack. Looks like he's going to play. Now over to Doc. He's going to complete from the small blind. So 3 out of the 4 players left are going to see a flop here. Amari, Doc Love, Aaron Massey, and Nick Schwarman.
And the flop is Jack 4-8, and everybody's got a piece except for Nick. Aaron flopped top pair. Mari has second pair. They both decide to check it over to Nick, though.
It's the beauty of raising pre-flop. Nick is now going to continuation bet to $135,000. I think that'll be good enough to get Amari out of the way. I don't see Aaron going anywhere with top pair.
I think after Aaron calls, it's a little tough for Amari to overcall there with second pair unless he's trying to get lucky on the turn. He can't possibly think that he has the best hand.
Well, Doc is going to try to get lucky on the turn of the river as he calls the bet. So the pot growing here, Maria, $820,000 in the middle up for grabs right now.
And I'm sure unless Nick hits his king, he's most likely planning on checking the turn. He doesn't like getting called in both spots there.
Queen of Diamonds is the turn, so that improves Aaron to 2 pair, and once again he's going to check.
And Amari also has turned a backdoor flush draw here, but he checks and Nick also checks behind. I might have liked to see Aaron lead there on the turn. You don't really want to give people a free card when the board's starting to get very draw heavy, and you have to think you have the best hand. With Queen Jack, you're only really afraid of 10-9.
Ace of clubs comes on the river, and Aaron is now going to bet for value, makes it $250,000. Amari has missed his flush.
But this is where, you know, if somebody really wanted to, they could put Aaron in a tough spot. The river being an ace of clubs isn't actually very good for Aaron's hand, and I think he might even fold to a raise.
Well, he's going to get tested. Amari is doing just that. He makes it $700,000, and quickly Nick Schwarman folds. So let's see if Doc can get Aaron off 2 pair here, 4-handed.
And I think because Amari has showed that he's capable of bluffing before, Aaron might call him here. And also because he didn't make it that much more to go. But, you know, this is a really good play by Amari. And if his sizing was different, or maybe if his table image was a little different, he might get Aaron to fold. I'm not really sure what Aaron's going to do. I think he's trying to get a read off him right now.
Did you turn the nuts?
Aaron asking if he turned the nuts. So he's putting him on 9-10 here, as that would have given him the queen high straight. Of course, now the nuts is king 10 for the Broadway straight. And Aaron is going to lay down 2 pair, and he shows it. And Doc is going to show the bluff. And look at the face that Massey is making.
It's a great play by Amari. I don't know how many more times he could bluff successfully after he's shown a few, but, you know, it's still a great play nonetheless.
Time now for one of our favorite segments in the show, A Poker Life with Doyle Brunson, brought to us by our friends at Ace Play Poker. This week, the legendary pro tells us one of his glamorous road stories of getting mugged by Tuda Dawaba.
We were playing poker in Lubbock, Texas, and there was a bookmaker that was about 5'5", weighed 400 and something pounds, and he spoke with a lisp. And everybody knew him, but he was a nice fella, and you know, but he lost his money all the time. So he was playing poker that night, and we were playing, and he lost all of his money, and got up angry and slammed out the door, and he went home. He got a ski mask and a shotgun. And he came back, busted through the door, and you know, said, "Y'all put your money on the table." Said, "This is a stick up. I'm taking your money." And everybody looked. Obviously, it was Tudor, 5'5", 400 pounds, and they said, "Oh, come on, Tudor, put that gun down. Come on, play." He says, "This is not Tudor. This is a wobber." And everybody just laughed at him, and he finally put the gun down and went back home.
What an exciting final table we have here in Gary, Indiana at the Majestic Star Casino. It's time to step aside for a quick commercial break, but when we come back, more exciting final table action. You're watching the HPT.
Thanks for coming back to the HPT. Maria Ho, Fred Bevel. We're at the Majestic Star Casino. Let's get right back to the table.
We have a new chip leader. Edward Oshana has pulled into that spot with over $3.8 million. Aaron Massey, Nick Schwarman, both over $3 million. And Amari Love with just under $3 million. Lots of deep stack play left.
Wow, really tight bunch separating first from third place here. And Amari Love just a big swing pot away from cracking the 3 million chip mark himself. Blinds continuing at 30 and 60,000 with a 10,000 chip ante. And it looks like Ed Oshana will be under the gun.
Looks at Jack 9 of clubs.
And that's good enough to raise. He's going to make it 125,000. Nick folds. Aaron folds. So it's up to Doc Love. See, he looks down at Ace King.
It's definitely a hand that I would be 3-betting with here, four-handed, out of position.
And you are correct, Maria. He does re-raise, makes it 360,000. 235,000 for Edward to see a flop here.
360.
It's definitely a good-sized re-raise. I'm not really sure if Edward is going to peel with Jack-9 suited. I'm sure he would love to see a flop with that kind of hand. I just don't know if it's the right price, but it is for him, and he is going to call.
Personally, I fold that hand. Am I wrong to fold that hand in this spot?
Definitely not. I think it just depends on a lot of factors. It depends on, if you think your opponent will pay you off if you hit your hand.
2 spades.
The flop is 5-10-4 with 2 spades. So expect the continuation bet from Amari after he 3-bet pre-flop.
And it's also about, with flops like these, when Amari doesn't hit, if you think you're going to be able to take the pot away from him without necessarily making your hand as well. So there's a lot of different factors. I would not fault you for folding.
350,000 is the continuation bet, and no pair, no draw, really, for Ed here. But that is not stopping him from staging chips, and he's going to make the call.
I think that's a float at best. I don't think Edward has many backdoor possibilities here, so I think he's hoping that he's just going to get Amari to slow down here, and he'll be able to take it away from him on the turn.
6 of diamonds falls on the turn. And unfortunately for Amari, he's out of position here post-flop, so he is going to slow down on the turn and check, and Ed checks back. Now that, I think, would be an opportunity for Ed to really pounce here.
I don't like that check back at all by Edward. I think that board is the best kind of board that Edward could try to bluff at on the turn, and now with the river pairing the board, I don't know if Edward's going to be able to get Amari off this hand if he chooses to bet this river.
The 4 of diamonds fell on the river, and Amari checked, so now Ed can't let this go to showdown. He has to bet something on the river.
But is it too late is the question. There is a missed spade draw from the flop, and that might just be enough for Amari to call him here on the river.
1.5 million in the pot, and Edward is going to bet 570,000. So a little more than a third size bet here, Maria.
There's 2 ways to take this bet size. If I were Amari, on one hand, it kind of looks like he wants a call. It's only representative of about a third of the pot. But on the other hand, it kind of makes it cheap for him to look him up with ace king high here if he thinks Edward is capable of betting this river as a bluff.
Making the call with ace high on the river might be the hardest call in the game. Let's see if Amari has it in him. Unfortunately, he does not. And Ed is going to steal this one from him. A little over 2 million in chips going into his stack from that pot.
I think Amari started a trend here with this table showing bluffs.
Aaron Massey is under the gun this hand. He looks down at his cards and decides what he's going to do. And pocket 10 is definitely worth a raise. He's going to make it 130,000. Amari quickly folds. So we're back to Ed.
Ed looks down at ace-4 offsuit. And I don't know if I would like him just calling here. I think if he wants to play, he should probably 3-bet. If he was the big blind, this would be kind of a no-brainer defend, but he ends up calling from the small blind.
Nick folds his big blind, so heads up we go to the flop.
The flop is 5 jack deuce, couple of hearts. Ed hasn't really flopped much, but a gut shot. Aaron's still ahead with his pair of tens.
Ed is out of position post-flop, so he checks. And Aaron makes the expected continuation bet. Makes it 125,000.
I think Aaron could pretty safely feel like he does have the best hand here, especially with Edward just calling.
Turn card, please.
The turn pairs the 5. Ed still has ace high. Aaron has 2 pair, 10s and 5s, but I would imagine that he's going to check back here with that turn.
350.
He's going to continue firing here. He makes it 350,000 on the turn.
I think there's only a few hands Edward has that he calls the flop with, and one of them is a flush draw. One of them's a jack, and one of them's a 5, so I'm not really sure why Aaron bet this turn.
I'm more concerned with why Ed is just calling. He calls pre-flop and he's check called both the flop and the turn. I'm expecting him to make a move on the river here.
And the river pairs the jack, so now there's 2 pair on the board, but Aaron has a better 2 pair with the 10s in his hand. But that river might get Edward to call one more street if Aaron's willing to bet it.
Again, a check from Edward. I would think if you're going to check call every street here, you're poised to make a play sooner or later. Let's see if he check raises the river.
It's a good value bet there by Aaron. I think he pretty much now knows that Edward has a hand like ace high, or maybe a pair smaller than 10s in his hand. So I think he's just trying to go for a little bit of value here, making it small enough just for Ed to be curious.
Ed is going to make the call, thinking 2 pair ace kicker was going to be good on the showdown. I can't imagine why, Maria, since Aaron fired every street. And all of those chips that Edward just won by bluffing Amari are now in Aaron's stack. So interesting play here, four-handed. More poker from East Chicago when we get back. Welcome back to the HPT. This lovely lady is Maria Ho. My name is Fred Bevel. We are at the Majestic Star Casinos here in Gary, Indiana. Let's get right back to this final table.
Edward Oshana and Aaron Massey in the 1 and 2 spots here. Nick Schwarman's dropped down a little bit to under $3 million. Amari Love has the shortest stack, but with 30 big blinds, he still has plenty of play.
Amari Love going in the wrong direction. Unfortunately, you can see he's down a little under $2 million in chips since we last checked in. Blinds are continuing at 30 and 60,000 with a 5,000 chip ante. And it looks like Amari is under the gun this hand. He looks down at ace queen offsuit. Good enough for a raise. He makes it 125,000. Now over to Edward. He's had the hot hand at this final table in the last blind level or two.
Again, I think King 5 suited in position is more of a hand I would like to see him 3-bet with four-handed instead of just flat. I think it just puts you in a tough spot if you don't really flop what you're looking for to continue without having the lead in the hand.
By lead, you mean the betting lead in the hand. The flop is 9-9 king rainbow, so Edward has out-flopped him. He's got the pair of kings. And Amari's going to fire a continuation bet to 150,000.
And Ed should probably just call here.
And you are correct. He makes the call.
You know, definitely changes the dynamic between players once, you know, a player has shown a bluff to another player. Sometimes gets you more action. But this time, Amari does pair his ace on the turn here, pulling him back into the lead.
And Amari's continuation bet is now followed up by another bet on the turn. He makes it 250,000. And Edward, previous hand, check called Aaron all the way down to the river. I can't imagine why he wouldn't do this now with second pair.
Yeah, and especially since they do have some history, I feel like maybe Ed might think, is Amari trying to bluff me this time?
A little under 1.2 million in the pot. The 3 of hearts falls on the river, so insignificant card. Amari's got the best hand unless Ed can bluff him again.
And I like to see Amari be able to go for a decent size value bet here, but, you know, he decides to check, and I don't know if I like that so much. I think it's fairly safe to assume that Ed doesn't have a 9 unless he thought Ed was planning on raising him on the river. And I feel like Amari only missed out on value there because Ed's almost always going to check behind with a king there, but he would have paid off a bet with a king. So I think Amari lost a bit of value on that hand.
Still stacking over 1 million in chips. He needed that for sure. And Edward, that's 2 hands back-to-back he's lost big pots with. That's going to start affecting his chip count. Nick Schwarman under the gun this hand. He's been quiet lately. Now we're over to Aaron Massey on the button. He is not going to play. So blind versus blind this hand. Samari looks down at queen 3.
I think both Aaron and Nick have done a really good job of picking their spots. It seems like Amari and Edward are the ones that play a little bit on the looser side and are getting a little more involved, especially with each other.
Amari limps from the small blind. Edward checks his option, so onto the flop we go.
The flop is ace 3-7, 2 clubs.
Edward has paired the 7. He was ahead anyway, but now he's got a pair to go with his hand. Amari has bottom pair. He's hit the 3. And Amari's the one doing the betting here. Makes it 125.
And I'm sure Edward's going to call at least once here, especially in a blind versus blind situation. It's pretty easy to call once you hit any pair.
Ace of
The
hearts.
turn is another ace, the ace of hearts. Amari now is going to check.
And what Edward's got to be thinking that his 7 with a king kicker here is good, so he's going to go for some value here.
185,000 is the price Amari is going to have to pay for a river card. And Amari must like that price. He's going to make the call.
And I think because this was an unraised pot before the flop, I think it's hard for either player to put the other one on an ace, and that's probably why Amari's calling this turn bet.
The king of spades comes on the river, giving Edward an even better 2-pair, and now he's got kings and aces.
And I think when Edward bets this, that'll be enough for Amari. Because other than the busted flush draw, I just don't think that Amari could really call here with a 3 unless he feels like Ed has total air.
335,000 is the bet from Edward.
335.
It's definitely screaming call me, and Amari does call here.
Kind of surprised Amari made that call, but he must have a little more history with Edward than what we've seen at this final table.
4 players remain, and it's anybody's game, and we're going to find out who our new HPT champion is going to be. So don't go too far. You're watching the HPT.
Thanks for coming back to the HPT. One of these players remaining is going for the top prize of over $150,000. Let's get back to the final table and watch this action.
Edward Oshana is still our chip leader with 4.7 million. Nick Schwarman and Aaron Massey both comfortable with their chip stacks. Amari Love with just under 1.5 million has 19 big blinds.
Blinds are moving up. They're now 40 and 80,000 with a 10,000 chip ante. We have 4 skilled players battling it out here to be our newest HPT champion. Boy, you play poker in the Chicagoland area, you have to bring the A game, no doubt about it.
There's definitely been some good players to come out of Chicago, and I know that from personal experience.
Aaron and Amari fold, so it looks like another blind versus blind situation between Edward and Nick. Edward's going to raise it up to 200,000 with off-suited King 10.
Nick calls with Queen 4 of clubs. I think in a blind versus blind situation, if you're a good post-flop player, there's probably a lot of hands that you should be calling with, especially in position.
Flop is deuce 6-6 with 2 clubs. That makes things a little interesting.
Edward has king high, and Nick has flopped a flush draw. Edward looks like he's going to put out a continuation bet, though, and it's a pretty safe flop for king high.
Bet is 270.
Edward bets 270,000. And Nick is going to flat call.
And the turn is the 8 of hearts, and that might slow Edward down.
And he checks.
He does check, and Nick is staging some chips here. I don't see him checking. He's going to semi-bluff his draw.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason why Nick shouldn't try to take down this pot right here without having to make his flush. But, you know, Edward doesn't look like he's going to believe him with king high, and he does call.
Wow, that was a quick call right there. Edward had it in his mind the whole way. He was calling Nick no matter what he bet. 1.78 million in this pot as we go to the river.
The river is the 10 of hearts, and now Edward has 10s and 6s, so it would be a fairly easy call if he did check. But it looks like he's going to lead into Nick now.
That is 675. Or 6.
He makes it 650,000.
600.
And I think Nick's taking his time because he's thinking, if I raise him on this river, would he be able to withstand the heat? Edward did play his hand kind of funny. It's hard for Nick to believe that he has a 6 here.
Raised to 1.7.
And Nick is going to take this opportunity to raise the river here on a bluff.
A little over $1 million in chips is the test from Nick. As he puts the hoodie over his head. And Edward had nothing until he paired his 10 on the river. Perhaps Nick might be a street too late on this. But we've seen Ed call everybody. And he is going to make this call. And Nick is not going to like what he sees here.
I think if Ed had anything less than what he had, he would have probably folded. It's just a shame for Nick that the river card hit Edward's hand.
Just under 5.2 million in that pot. That's a monster. As blinds continue at 40 and 80,000 with a 10,000 chip ante, and you can see Nick Schwarman's chip stack is Not so much anymore. He's going to go all in with King Jack offsuits.
With King Jack and only 7 big blinds, Nick has no choice but to move his stack in the middle.
Well, his all in is good enough to get Aaron Massey out of the way, so now it's up to Amari Love. He's going to fold. So we're back to Edward O'Shannah, who has just been white hot the last blind level or so. He is going to make the call with King 10, so Nick way ahead here pre-flop.
I think King 10's a pretty standard calling hand there against Nick's stack size. Nick's not a player you want to double up, though. He is very dangerous, and he is ahead.
The flop is 10, deuce, 4, rainbow. So Edward has outflopped Nick. So Nick hoping to find a jack.
Turns a 7 of clubs, not the card that Nick is looking for, and he's down to the river, and the river only to spike a jack. Otherwise, he'll be eliminated in 4th place.
The one-time chip leader in danger of going out. He needs luck on the river, which does not come. And Maria, no limit Texas Hold'em. A mistimed bluff and your opponent hitting a 3-outer is all you need to be eliminated, and Nick has to say goodbye in 4th place. So Nick's going to go home with a little under $43,000 as we continue play 3-handed here.
Feel like they all really like each other. None of them want to spread out here when they're 3-handed. They got all the room in the world. Amari's going to move in his chip stack, which is roughly about 17 big blinds in with 6-5 offsuit. I don't think that's highly recommended, but...
Well, Amari hoping the random hand of Ed O'Shannah is not good enough to make the call.
All right, call.
But he does make the call, and why wouldn't he? Ace-9, perfectly good call here.
I just think 17 big blinds is a little bit too much to move in with a hand like 6-5 off.
Would like to have just seen a standard raise and
Yeah,
little
he still has
post-flop play.
definitely. Amari had enough to raise fold off his stack, or just even limp in and see if he could see a flop for cheap.
Well, Amari is behind, but he's got 2 live cards. Hoping to double up and stay alive at this final table. Here is the flop.
The flop is deuce, ace, 3, 2 diamonds. Edward pairs his ace. Amari does have a little glimmer of hope of 4 would give him a straight.
Please.
Onto the turn we go. It's the 6, so that opens a few more outs as he pairs his 6. So a 4 for the straight, a 6 for trips, or a 5 for 2 pair. 4, 5, or 6 is what Amari needs on the river.
And the river is the jack of clubs, and that is not going to do it for Amari Love. He's going to be eliminated in 3rd place, taking home over $61,000 and change.
Amari Doc Love, no stranger to the HPT, no stranger to an HPT final table. He had another nice payday with us this weekend. Let's hear what he has to say about today's play with our floor reporter, James Larson.
Thanks a lot, guys. I am here with Doc, who's finishing in 3rd place. That's the good news, a nice payday. However, you came in as the chip leader. I know you wanted to win this. How do you think you played at this final table?
Pretty well. Not perfect. A little bit card dead, a little bit cooler. They got my aces cracked early. A very talented table, so you really needed to hit hands, and it really just didn't happen. Maybe 1 or 2 hands I could have played differently, but for the most part, happy with how it went down.
And for 3rd place, you go home with just over $61,000. Not a bad payday.
Not bad for a weekend's work, you know.
Congratulations. Give it up for Doc. It was great having him at our HPT final table. Freddie and Maria, we'll send it over to you.
This is my favorite part of poker coming up. That heads-up play is about to start.
Thanks for coming back to the HPT, where we are now heads up for the championship and over $150,000. Let's get right to the final table.
Coming into heads-up play, Edward O'Shannah has the chip lead with over $10 million. Aaron Massey has over $3.3 million, and that might seem like a big chip deficit, but Aaron has plenty to play with.
A big lead for Edward, but as you said, Maria, 42 big blinds in Aaron's stack, and he's definitely got the skill to grow it. Let's see what happens here as we begin heads-up play, as blinds are continuing at 40 and 80,000 with a 10,000 chip ante. Edward's going to raise it to 160,000 here pre-flop. Aaron's going to make the call with 8-6 offsuits. So the first heads-up flop.
The flop is deuce, 8, deuce. Aaron has paired his 8. Edward has king high. Aaron checks it over to Edward, who decides that he wants to bet this.
175.
And he makes it 175,000. And I see a raise coming from Mr. Massey. And he is going to make it 420,000. Just reading Aaron's body language, the check raise was his plan from go.
I think in heads-up play, you definitely have to extract maximum value when you do hit a pair. And Edward's the kind of person that will pay you off with ace high, king high in these situations, I think. So I like the check raise by Aaron.
Edward is a very sticky player. He's hard to get to lay down hands, and he's proven that time and time again as the turn delivers the 9 of clubs. So now Edward pulls ahead.
Now Edward with the better hand, but Aaron is probably still going to fire again.
900,000.
He fires big, makes it 900,000.
Just a little less than pot size bet for Aaron. I think he doesn't want Edward to see a river for cheap with overcards. Little does Aaron know that the 9 has actually hit Edward's hand.
Call.
And Edward's just going to smooth call. So Maria, this could be a very short heads-up match as this pot is just under 3 million in chips.
I think if the river comes up baby card, it's going to be hard for Aaron to get away from this hand. River's the ace of diamonds, so that might slow the action down unless you go all in like Aaron did, turning his hand into a bluff, I think, here. And, you know, it's actually not a bad card to turn your hand into a bluff if you feel like Edward doesn't have an ace here. And you can also represent the trip deuces, obviously.
Well, the longer it takes for Edward to call, the better Aaron feels about his bluff. The fact that he didn't snap call Maria lets him know he doesn't have an ace.
I think there is a chance that Edward might fold this, although Aaron's range is pretty polarized here.
Call.
And Maria, the call is made. One hand heads up, and Edward is able to close the door on this match. And you can see Aaron Massey disappointed, and rightly so, but a great run for him this weekend.
I think Aaron played well to get here. That river bluff just didn't work out for him, but he's going to go home with over 94,000. He's on the floor with James Larson to talk about his experience here on the HPT.
Thanks so much, guys. I'm now joined down here with Aaron, 448 players. You didn't get first, you got second. I know you're not happy, but what's going through your mind right now?
Yeah, I'm really disappointed, even coming into the heads-up match short. I thought I was going to win. Pretty disappointed. You know, I really always shoot to win, but I'm happy with the cash, and just move on to the next one.
And you're obviously going to play another HPT event and get yourself back in this scenario to hopefully take one of these down.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be back. I love the HPT. You guys have made a lot of strides in the last year, so you'll be seeing my face a lot. And, you know, I'm just going to be at another tournament, another place, in another city. I figure things are to come. So I'm just going to take this, move on, and make the best of it moving forward.
Hey, before I let you go, come on. Over 90,000. You had a pretty good weekend. You got to be happy. But second isn't always fun, but you got to be happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure those guys back there will make me feel better a little bit. But,
guys, let's give him a round of applause. He was a pleasure to have at our HPT final table. He's going home in second place with over 90,000 in cash. Freddie and Maria, we'll send it over to you.
Thank you very much, James Larson, and congratulations again to Aaron Massey. Look forward to seeing him at a cash game now that he's got a bankroll injection. Now, the night belongs to Edward Oshana. This man may not have been your first pick to win this final table, but this goes to show you, slow and steady always wins the race. He's standing by with James Larson right now to hear what it's like to be our newest HPT champion.
Thanks so much, guys. I'm now joined with our new champion. Give it up for Eddie Oshana, everybody. All right, Eddie, I know it's been a long weekend, so I'll keep this short, but did you think you'd be standing here talking to me on national television with over 152,000 in front of you and the championship?
I like my chances coming in. I know that the field was pretty tough when I came to the final table. I knew Aaron was going to make it. He was probably my toughest opponent. I mean, I was trying to stay out of his way, but at the end, I knew to pick up some momentum, and I knew I had it after that. He was not getting in my way. I wasn't getting in his way, but at the end, it all went my way.
And I'm sure you guys are going to celebrate, and I hope we see you at another HPT event.
You guys did a very great job. Jeremy is the best manager ever. I'll tell you that again.
All right. Well, that is Eddie. He's our champion here from the Majestic Star Casino in Gary, Indiana. What a week it has been. Maria and Fred, we'll send it over to you.
Thank you very much, James Larson, and congratulations again to Edward Oshana, our newest HPT champion. Now, Maria, I said it a moment ago, he may not have been the first pick on who was going to take down this final table, but he showed up everybody, didn't he?
He certainly did. I mean, on that last hand, Aaron Massey, you can't really blame the guy for trying to win the pot. It just was bad timing. Edward wasn't going to go anywhere. So Edward is our newest HPT champion, and congratulations to him.
Now, do you think you have what it takes to be in Edward O'Shaughnessy's shoes or any HPT champion shoes? Well, then come prove it. Log on to hptpoker.com and find an event near you. I promise you'll have a lot of fun. For Maria Ho and James Larson, I'm Fred Bevel. We'll see you right here next time on the HPT.